Welcome to this Euranet Plus debate presented within the Citizens Corner concept. The debate is produced and hosted by Euranet Plus and MTVA Hungary, a member of the Euranet Plus network. The debate can be followed live from the European Parliament on our Euranet Plus Inside website, on our Facebook profile, as well as on Twitter using the hashtag Citizens Corner. I'm Brian Maguire. Joining us today to discuss citizens' rights in Europe, Danuta, a centre-right member of the European Parliament from Poland, Mercedes Bresso, Social Democrat MEP from Italy, Green MEP Tomasz Mezerich from Hungary, Kostas Rizgonos, a Greek MEP from the United Left political group, and the German Pirate and Green MEP Julia Reda. We are also joined by students from the Euranet Plus Campus Radio Network, Zaneta Czyzniewska from the University of Warsaw and Raymond Fustos from Babeș-Bolyai University in Romania. Thank you for joining us today. Let's start by talking about what citizenship is first, before we talk about the rights of citizens. Mercedes, what is it to be a citizen?
I think a citizen, a European citizen, is one quality we have in plus of our normal citizenship. We are a citizen of a city, of a region, sometimes of a country, a nation, and we are citizens of Europe. And this is means more right, and means also that our rights are spendable, usable in all the European countries, not only in our country, but in all the European countries. And this is a great enlargement of our right. There are a lot of rights that we have as citizens. As European citizen, we can move, we can work, we can have health assistance, we can vote in all European vote for local election and for European election in all European countries. We have a lot of other rights, but these are some examples.
Can I just add
Sure,
to that?
of course.
Because I think citizenship is also about emotion, and especially in Europe. No? It's just also the feeling that you belong, that you are part of it. You have the feeling of ownership. Europe is not happening. We are all creating it. So having this feeling that you can participate is also extremely important. But what Mercedes mentioned is very important, that you have this hyphenated citizenship, that being a citizen of Italy or of Poland or Greece does not mean that you cannot be citizen of Europe, or the other way around. No? So they are not excluding each other, but they are just...
I agree totally about emotion. For me, I am a federalist, European federalist since long time. For me, it's very emotional. When I had the passport, red passport with written European Union, for me was absolutely important.
Danuta, you're also a strong advocate of federalism with the Spinelli Group as well, is that correct?
I belong to Spinelli Group, we
Okay. Tomasz, in terms of values and citizenship, is citizenship more emotional, more about values than about rights?
Well, actually, you can look at it in both ways. So, these are not, again, exclusive categories. They go together in the sense that they don't mean much with one without the other. If you have an attachment, an emotional identity, emotion-based identity, to which you do not have legal sort of rights attached to it, that's something which is might or might not work. However, if you have a set of rights which define you as a member of something, but you have no emotional attachment whatsoever, it again doesn't mean too much. So the two necessarily go together. On the other hand, how far these emotions can be actively perceived at the level of the European Union. So how far European citizens consider themselves to be European citizens, that's partly a sociological question, of course. You can measure it, and Eurobarometer does regular measuring of it, and the results are mixed at best. But what is more important, I believe, is that these basically these emotions, which are part of the ownership, so to speak, of these large institutions, can be fostered emotionally as well. And of course, we all know since Greek ancient democracy that the best way to create emotional attachment is through participation. If there are channels of participation, you'll get more of it. As simple as that, and we know that since 2,000 years.
Okay, Kostas, let's go talk about Greece. The sense of citizenship in Greece. What do people understand by citizenship within the European Union?
Well, I agree. It is obviously a legal relation, but at the same time, it is being part of a collective identity. And I should add that results of the Eurobarometer are not mixed. They are disappointing. Something like 40% of the Europeans say that they don't feel Europeans at all. They only feel German or Greek or whatever. Another 40 or 45% feel primarily Greeks or German or whatever, and secondarily European.
If you look at
only a very little proportion, less than 10%, feel that they are primarily European. So there is a lack of collective identity, and this has, of course, to do with the feebleness of the European institutions.
Okay. This has to do.
It's both ways.
This counter this. If you were American, for example, and you lived in Texas, Governor Rick Perry's state, and at the last election, he was still talking about the possibility of Texas leaving the United States. In America, to us, that seems incredible, but for many Americans, they look at themselves as coming from the state first, though they're also American. And often we talk about the United States of Europe. How do you see this this relationship between the state and the nation state?
I think the European citizenship or the move towards further European integration is very important for the legitimacy of the union, because otherwise it would just be an economic union. And I think that citizens do appreciate that it's not just goods and services that are traded over borders within the European Union, but it's actually also the freedom of movement and rights. But at the same time, I think we also have to be careful that this concept of citizenship and the emotion behind it is not used to exclude people. So, for example, a lot of the fundamental rights in the European Union actually don't just apply to citizens, but also to residents of the Union. For example, freedom of information and things like that. And so I think we should also stress on and make sure that even though the citizenship is an important concept, that we don't exclude the rights of the people who are not European citizens and who are still living here.
Okay. Raymond, you're Romanian, and you're from a generation which has known nothing but Europe as an entity. Do you feel European or Romanian?
You know, in Romania, many people are not aware what does mean to be European. They are not aware about their rights, and they don't care about it. The only thing they come in the mind when they're speaking about being European is working more easy abroad and traveling more easy. And speaking about European rights, an interesting thing is that on the past Sunday, there were presidential elections in Romania. Thousands of people waited for more than 3 hours in many of the European countries like Brussels, Rome, London, and so on. And many of them hadn't even made to the vote cabins.
The polling stations, yes.
Yes. So, if voting is a basic human right,
Okay.
I guess.
Okay, so the sense of entitlement, for example, if you go to Ukraine, parts of Ukraine look to European Union because they feel European. And though they don't have citizenship, they have this identity and this aspiration to a citizenship. So let's talk about the values becoming rights. What are the rights of a citizen here? Danuta.
Can I just
Yes,
about the rights? Because what you mentioned is that voting right is a right, but voting right should be also obligation in the sense of you should feel that it is your participation in using the democracy to have impact on.
So rights and responsibility.
Absolutely. So I think that we should just balance it better and see that truly citizenship means that you as a citizen you are having also responsibility vis-à-vis your small community where you live, or vis-à-vis the country, or vis-à-vis Europe, and we we don't talk about that. We really look at the right side of the citizen rights and not on the obligation side. So that's one thing. And in this context, participation, of course, is very important, because participation is also creating this feeling of responsibility which comes with ownership, and that's why it's so important. On the rights, I think it's what is good about I think our citizenship is that it is in the treaty. It is in the treaty since Maastricht, since basically the first half of 1990s. But the current treaty, which is the current legal basis, which is shaping our living, functioning together, has strengthened strongly. And we are quite unhappy with the European Citizens Initiative, which is the right to provide a draft for a legal decision. We will have now review of that, how to see that it functions better, how to overcome the difficulties linked to information, to languages, to all those things. So, but we have a machinery to make people participate and have impact on the decisions made in the European Union. That's extremely important. Okay. But then we have also the rights which are linked to our cross-border functioning daily, related to the fact that we marry together, we study here, we work there, we have health rights. So there is a lot of small rights which come from the treaty, which are even more important for people.
Tomas, in terms of demos, the participation in democracy as well, Dr. Joseph Stigler from New York University, he writes about the sense of active participation. If you can't actually have an impact in the democratic process, you don't feel as though you belong to it. Is this a problem we have with our citizenship in Europe today?
That's a general problem, actually, of political participation in all democracies. Europe or member states within Europe are no exception to that. What makes this particular case somewhat more complicated, it's not just the institutional complications coming with the European Union, but rather the fact that the underlying social and economic realities are not going in one single direction. Okay. Therefore, a shared feeling of we have ownership over the whole is very difficult to achieve, even with participation. As long as there's a clear line separating the East and the South from the North and the West within Europe by all economic and social indicators, and as long as this chasm is actually growing, you have less hope of overcoming simply by creating a political platform for it, although that is necessary for it.
Okay. Mercedes, in Italy as well, you have a north-south divide within the country, and even in the north, there are parts of the north who'd like to separate still further. How do you deal with this kind of integration of a society which seems a little spoiled at times?
I think that Europe is a very complex thing. We have a strong feeling of being European. If you go abroad, you can realize how much we are particularly different from the other part of the world. But in Europe we have an history. You remember that we have differences, regional differences, regional identity, citizenship identity. In Italy, the main identity is the citizenship of your city or village. The same is in France, the same I think is in Germany. In Germany it's not the city, is probably the region, the main citizen for people. What I think is very important that we learn and we could have more known from our citizens what means to be also Europeans, European citizens, not to abandon our previous identity, which are very important.
So it sits together.
And just a simple thing, I think we have a lot, and we will have in the future a lot of practical problem that have to be solved. For example, mixed marriages are enormous in Europe now. But I have my husband is from Switzerland, so it's not exactly Europe, but it's a hyper complex situation. So if you work to have a real citizenship right, very simple, to simplify all the bureaucratic procedure, people will feel that being European is also very important from an emotional point of view, but also from a practical point of view. The young men who told that for them is important to travel and to work, but travel and work is probably the most important part of our life. So the problem is how to communicate this to a young European. They have a lot of right, and they can learn to use them.
Okay, let me ask also, you talk about the Eurobarometer and the measurement of how people feel about being European. Do you think the biggest obstacle to this positive sense of being European, of being a European citizen, is bureaucracy?
No. I think it's the politics being implemented by European elites.
Who are the elites?
Who are the elites? The bankers, big capital, political elites as well, a political class which tends to be very professionalized, and it tends to become a semi-closed body in various ways. So the politics which are being implemented by the European elites are politics which are not welcomed.
Do they diminish rights?
Rights are not being respected in practice. They are being sworn to.
And do you think this is why people don't believe in the sense of citizenship, because they don't see their rights actually being implemented in practice?
Yes, up to a certain degree, at least. I think this is one of the main reasons. Of course, we've got to bear in mind that Europe was never united in history.
Let me ask you.
So that's an objective factor. But for example, China is a region which is comparable to Europe geographically and in various other ways. China was united for the first time in the something around 2020 before Christ, and it has remained united ever since, because mainly of geographical reasons.
Tibet?
Well, not just Tibet, because there are many other regions within China where they have these issues.
The geographical and political obstacles to unification were less severe there than they are in Europe. European unification is anyway a very difficult project.
They never took their wall down in China, though. We took ours down.
But I don't think it is being implemented in the right way.
Okay, Julia.
I think he has a point to an extent. I mean, I think China is probably also very diverse internally, but it's much more easy to see that when you're actually in there. So I think we perceive the differences when you're within Europe also very acutely, because we are very familiar with the situation in our member states and in the Union as a whole.
But do you think the Chinese are able to compel people to be Chinese because they simply don't respect their rights?
Well, actually, I think... I don't really want to talk about China as such. I do think there are vast regional differences, though, also within China. But what I have to agree with is this distinction between rights in principle and rights in practice, because you were mentioning that a lot of Germans possibly identify this with their region. I think this is mostly true for people who are relatively socially deprived, and also more for the older generation. Among young people in Germany who have the privilege to go to university, a lot of them also have the privilege to travel, to spend a year abroad with the Erasmus program or something like that. And those are exactly the people that form a European identity. So it's not enough to have the right in principle to travel in Europe, but you also have to have the means to actually do it.
Okay, let me ask you, Zaneta, do you think this is something which is going to change over generation, whereas this Erasmus generation, as it matures, instinctively has the potential it is to be European?
Yes, of course, because Erasmus gives the possibility to mix cultures, to mix different points of view, and that's true. That it forms our citizenship feeling. But I have also the question according to bureaucracy. One of the European citizens' rights is petitioning. But according to that bureaucracy, in 2012, it was like 2,300 petitions to the parliament, but only 1,400 were accessible.
Okay.
And what with the rest?
Let's ask Danuta. But the petitioning aspect changed this year really because of the water petition, which saw a threshold reached reasonably quickly.
You talk about European Citizen Initiative.
Citizen initiatives and the petitions as well, yes, sorry.
Yeah,
Yes,
because petitions is another story.
Okay.
Yeah, but of course there is. This is a new exercise, and
Yeah.
it's just 3-4 years that we are into it, and that's why it's important because we all evaluate that it doesn't function well, and we look into the reasons, and I think there are many reasons for that. And I had just recently a meeting with an organization from Germany who were explaining to me also what are the problems there when they collect, for example, information. People don't want to give the address when they have to sign, so we have to look into more the internet-related facilities in this context, and that's why I hope that the current review of it, which is done by the Commission, but also in the Parliament and my committee, we are also preparing for the hearing on it, and we will see we can improve it, because I think it's an excellent instrument in the hands of citizens, but it has to work, and people have to see that it works.
Julia.
I agree with that, but I think one of the reasons why it's so difficult, for example, to collect signatures for the European Citizens Initiative online or to sign petitions online is because there's also a fear of more citizen participation within the institutions. So when the European Citizens Initiative was introduced, I think it was a great step. But still, the Commission is extremely careful. They don't want to promise to even the successful initiatives that they are actually going to put forward a legislative initiative. They have a lot of security requirements and software requirements for collecting signatures. And this is, I think, because fundamentally they are afraid of giving away some of the power to the people.
I asked Maros Sefcovic at the time about the water initiative. Was this the first populist policy the European Commission would ever advance? And he was saying the Commission doesn't do populism. So how do you reconcile these positions?
No, but I think also what the Commission is doing with every initiative, that it goes to national parliament, where the parliament have the right to assess it from the point of view of subsidiarity. Everything is consulted on web, and we have hundreds of thousands of people responding, not only institutions. So there is a lot of openness, I think, on the side of the European institutions to get the involvement of the citizens. But very often we are doing things which at the level of member states are not yet implemented. So we are learning, I think, both the organizations which represent citizens, individual citizens, we institutions. I think this is something which is in doing, in learning, and I'm optimistic about this. I think we are on the path towards having more participatory democracy in Europe.
But
Sorry,
about European Citizen Initiative, there is a problem, as you said, from the Commission. It's difficult to collect the signature, and we have to simplify. But once collected, the Commission should propose a legislative proposal, because this is his duty, and they haven't done enough for any one of the successful initiative. We succeeded in the complex role to collect signatures was translated in a proposal from the Commission. This is a big problem, the big problem of European Citizen Initiative.
Okay, we have a question online on Facebook from Giorgio, and Giorgio wants to ask, should Europe be a protector of EU citizens against a strong power like Viktor Orban? And what could the EU, whether you perceive him as a strong power or not, what can the EU do to defend ourselves against a nation state? Kostas. It's depressing, isn't it?
This is a good question. First of all, let me say that I don't consider the European Union, as it stands today as a basically democratic creation.
Okay.
For one reason is that there is actually no European demos, so you can't have really democracy without demos. You can have it, of course, as time passes, and if the institutional architecture were democratic in its essence, but it is not. I think it's basically an authoritarian scheme which is implementing a postmodern dictatorship of capital markets. It's faceless.
Let me ask you what a good example of demos would be in Europe. Which country?
All European countries as such have national demi.
Even Belgium.
It has multiple forms.
This has perhaps more than one, yes, more than one demos. But the problem is that the unification of demos can requires time, of course. It cannot be done through a decrease from above. And it also requires European institutions which would give the citizens real chances for participation.
Okay, let me ask
The
you
fact that European citizens participate in European elections at something like 42%, and they participate in national elections at something like 70%.
Not everywhere.
Not everywhere.
Not everywhere. It's not a European.
Well, this comes back to what you said about the responsibility to actually vote.
The middle participation in European elections all over
I don't
28 member states
Okay,
is
Julian.
69%.
Costas, but
But
you
I-
have to take just one thing
Yeah.
into account, that European tradition is national democracy, and what supranational democracy is something that will not happen by itself, that we are really creating. And if you want people to identify Europe with elites, with European institutions, where I disagree with you, I think then we will never succeed. I think as long as Europe does not, as we don't get to the citizens, I mean the guy who is your mayor, or who lives around the corner, and who's your local guy, and if he doesn't talk about Europe, if he does not help you to understand what Europe is, we will never get it, because people cannot just look to European institutions to come for the information that would come from Brussels. I think we need to make Europe really not only present, because it is present locally, having impact on our life, but also in the perception of the people that Europe is there around the corner. Then we will not succeed.
The Americans talk about this being talking to Main Street. You know,
Yeah,
talking
I mean-
and this sense that everybody is running for election against Washington. They want to go to Washington and change Washington. Yes, Mercedes.
To Giorgio, because
Yeah.
the problem of the non-respect of European rules, democratic rules, is from a state is a real problem. So I think that we should go ahead and probably discuss about this in our committee, Constitutional Committee, because we should suspend some rights to the states.
We
for
have
example,
Austrian example in the history.
Yes,
yeah.
yes, we had some example, but in some situation we are probably afraid. We should have a very.
Should we not be afraid of the consequence of not intervening?
Yeah.
Should we?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, the consequence of not doing anything
Yeah.
is greater than
Yeah.
the
It
consequence of
stays
acting.
in the institutional memory.
Yes. For example,
And
we
people-
could suspend European fund. We could suspend the right to vote in the council. We should try to define before some rules applying to all member
Okay.
states, not for one, but to use this case as we used the one in Austria to became to have some concrete rules to apply to
Well,
the states.
the United Kingdom, for example, if David Cameron doesn't pay up on the 1st of December, a lot of people across the street are going to be very
we
upset.
should
And in-
suspend all the European fund to the. No,
I
this
don't know
is
whether you
clear.
would care.
This is
but-
clear.
But this is exactly when that kind of thing happens. 5 days later, we have a response to the Commission, and then when we decide that we're going just to ignore the abolition at times of values or rights, European citizens against journalists, for example, in Hungary, it takes weeks, months, or years to do nothing.
I think
Julia.
this is actually a good example of one of the reasons why this European demos is actually undermined is because national governments are constantly blaming Brussels for decisions that they have actually made themselves. And in this case, of course, the legal basis and the numbers going into this number is actually coming from the member states. And I don't think it's enough to simply say, well, there is no European demos and hence it's not a democracy, because this is how the demos in the national countries came about. Usually there were some democratic rights that were implemented first, and the identity developed as a consequence of that. So I think we need to...
I agree to that, but democratic rights which exist now are not enough in order to create the sense of team.
I agree. I think you also have to have the means to actually exercise them.
Gina, do you think that the European sense of democracy, sense of citizenship and sense of responsibility is maturing?
Actually, I think so, but the basis is how to educate new generation to know what the democracy, European democracy is. For example, in Poland we have like 20 or something European direct points, and they work very good. They organized competitions for people, I don't know, for students. We also have the info point in Warsaw, for example, when we as a students can find all informations about...
But does anybody read it today? Everybody's on their iPads and their mobile phones. Is really an info point the way to educate European citizens?
Yes, of course, because, you know, when I go to the info point, I can feel the sense of Europe, really. And if I need some information to my essay or something, it's the best point when I can go and find information needed.
So you can get it through the web as well. So
yeah.
don't forget that we have everything.
Yes, of course.
But I agree with you that it's good to see on the street the visibility, the stars.
Okay, so it's about branding Europe.
Absolutely. I think we lack it very much. And for the demos, I think it's also very
So for
important.
us, the branding Europe is very, very important. But for people like, I don't know, at students in primary school, the competitions, the lessons about Europe, this is the work needed.
Okay, so
that the branding Europe through blame games, which you mentioned, no? The minister who's making decision here then goes back home, goes to TV and says, this horrible Brussels made a decision. This is the nightmare which continues for 50 years, and we continue to have.
Well, there are different generational aspects to this. There's the youth at a very junior level, then the student level, and then we get to the business sector where they're dealing with bureaucracy and we're dealing with VAT across borders and what's supposed to be a single market. And at some point, people just don't feel that it's working the way it should. Mercedes, do you think that this will change?
Yes, I think that it has to change. I don't know if it will change. But Franz Timmermans, the new first Vice President of the Commission, take a very strong engagement to simplify the European laws, European directives, but to simplify in general the European bureaucracy. It's not so simple because bureaucracy is a hard problem all over, also
Mr.
in our country.
Matteo Renzi has decided very promptly that things should change in Italy and seems to be having some pace with it. Can the same be done with European bureaucracy in these aspects, or will it be another generation before we see truly a single market? Because consumer rights, when people talk about my rights, the first thing they think of usually is not democracy, but consumer rights.
But I am not sure, because I was a rapporteur in the European Parliament in 2004 of the legislation about unfair trade attitude, and is becoming a reality in our countries. For example, the protection of consumers that not in all European countries we had, probably in certain, but anyway, not in southern countries, for example. So Europe has made something for the consumer. I think that is what is more difficult is the complexity of legislation for business. On this we have to work. The legislation for consumer is good. The problem is the implementation in the states, but it exists and it's very good.
Let me ask Julia about this. You deal with copyright principally. Any other issues that you think is really important with?
Well, I think we actually need to stop talking about the European Union being this big bureaucratic monster, because actually it is not. Whenever we are harmonizing certain areas of law, like for example copyright, the results would be that people don't get this video is not available in your country message anymore, and this is not making laws on a European level is not actually adding a layer of bureaucracy, but making it easier to operate in the same sphere across borders. And also, I'm a bit skeptical about the European Commission's agenda when it comes to better regulation and cutting red tape and so on, because first of all, some regulation is there for a reason, and even the small companies that are supposed to be supported by that, they even say, we're actually happy to have this regulation in place because it keeps shady competition out that don't want to follow the rules and don't want to protect their consumers.
For me, the real challenge with the better regulation is really to shorten the time that we need to change it. It's about 7 years, I think, on average.
Action
and
in
this
Italy
is
as well,
exactly what we have to do, and this is for me the better regulation. But to have it shortened, I think we need also doing programming together between the institutions that participate, the Council, the Commission, the Parliament, and I hope that the new Commission will bring also not only a better regulation in terms of red tapes, but also the better process of regulating and make it short and make it decided
but
together.
We have also very good news. For example, the roaming, the progressive abolition of roaming for young people is absolutely essential.
This is a very good idea.
It's a very good idea.
But also the last thing we sometimes forget what you mentioned, that the European regulation harmonization means replacing 28 national laws with one European law. So by definition, it is not.
But sometimes the states forget to abolish their own law.
Okay, and this is also the case when it comes to marriage and to custody of children and family operations, which increasingly, like you mentioned, do we think that this is going to change as well, where the freedom movement of people is accelerated in terms of work, but also,
Yes, is accelerating, but we need a simplification of the legislation for families, not only for individuals, but consider that there are families, so there are husband, children, wife, who need to be helped by European legislation. I think that this is an important aspect of the harmonization of legislation, because the harmonization until now, the harmonization is more about business activities, commercial market activities. The individual family activities are not in the mainstreaming of
on
harmonization.
Facebook with one of our commentators, Frank. He points this out, is that it hasn't changed. The national legislation still
because
has
that's protected as national sovereignty. We have to remember that member states sometimes do not want certain areas to be harmonized.
Clear, but it's absolutely necessary. For example, the health, the common health, which is not really common, but we can anyway use in exceptional situation. All the health system of the European Union are very important, but there are a lot of others. So the free movement of people is very related to this legislation. So I think that we have to convince the states to resign a bit of
We're coming further close to the end of the program, but I want to touch on something which has more pressing, a more pressing issue now because of defense in Russia. Nigel Farage has made many proclamation here, and one of the things he said was that I swear no oath of allegiance to that flag. Now, when we're under attack at some point in the future by some country, Russia or otherwise, who will we rally to? Who will we want to defend us? And will we want to belong to Europe, or will we want to belong to a nation state at that point? Costas.
To NATO.
There is one member state which is actually now under threat of attack. That is Cyprus, which is its economic zone in the seas southern of Cyprus being put in doubt by Turkey, and there is not enough European solidarity. But if I may
Quickly,
come to a conclusion, what we really need is not only regulation. We have regulation. 2/3 of national legislation is coming out of Brussels, one way or another. What we need is more redistribution. For example, the union's budget stands at only 1% of the union's GDP. In comparison, the federal budget in the US stands at something like 22% of American GDP. So this is not sustainable.
But when we see the rebalancing of budgets, and you're going to go back to the UK example, the idea that the UK has to pay out nearly 2 billion euros more is really not playing very well within the UK. Why do we have to give our tax money to the others, they say? And is this a matter of political management over the longer term, and which Brussels needs to be better at, and rather than just be technocratic about it? Danuta.
Well, there's a lot of dimensions to that. First of all, I think we must remember that this transfer of funds is not the only transfer of benefits that we have from the European integration, and the countries that benefit more from funds are the countries which at the same time benefit much less from the internal market, and the most developed, which benefit less from the funds, and which contribute more to the budget, they benefit enormously from other aspects of European integration. This is something which we sometimes forget. The second thing, of course, the budget. If we consider how much we really finance with European budget, it's a miracle that we managed to do it with 1%. But I understand that the discussion is going on for 50 years, will continue to go on for the next probably 50 years. But we have to rethink seriously how we finance those expenditures. So what is the source of the financing of European activity? We know that it shouldn't be GDP, and we should have an independent source of funding. But it's still something for this parliament, I hope, to answer.
I came back to defense. 10 seconds. I think that we need a European common defense. This is absolutely necessary, is the moment, and I think that is asked from European people, mainly from the new countries. And so it could be the way to create a common sense of Europe.
Julia, 5 seconds.
Yeah, I think if we're going to go that way, then we can't forget once again the rights. So if we're going to have a European defense, that means that the European Parliament also needs to be able to veto a military action, because otherwise there's no accountability.
Good response. Okay, we've covered a lot of ground today. We started talking about what citizenship is and the concept of democracy, participation. And it seems that we need rights as well as responsibility, and perhaps not enough responsibility put up on the citizens to actually participate within the process. We're dealing also with principles and practice. It's one thing to create the laws, another thing to have them put into place effectively and in a timely way as well. So better regulation within a shorter time is critical to us. And the creation of a supranational system takes time. We're still early days in this. The Americans have had another 150 years on top of our time so far. And funds and benefits. How we manage the budget better, using more funds or redistributing in a better way as well, things to come up. And then petitions and citizens' initiatives as well. How we get the citizen engaged directly with the European democracy here in Brussels as well, in a way which they may feel comes close to what they can do at home as well. Let me thank our guests today, Danuta HÜBNER, Mercedes Bresso, Tomasz Mazerczyk, who's disappeared, and Kostas Chrysogonos from Greece. Julia Reda, thank you so much, and our two students today as well, Zaneta Czyzniewska and Raymond Fustos. I'm Brian Maguire. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.